15 insane things in Democrats' H.R. 1 bill to corrupt elections forever. Now, 15. I have 15 things with an exclamation point. I had to limit it in the interest of time because there's a lot to get to today, to the worst of the worst. I'm going to cut it down to 4 of the 15 things. Please read the whole article again in the newsletter. And I think it'll give you a full spectrum of just how bad this thing is. But we're going to narrow it down to the worst of the worst. There's probably more than 15 things that are awful in there. Number 1, do you know about this? That would eliminate voter ID election security. Why would we want something like that? Showing up and showing a driver's license and things like that. That's crazy. You need a driver's license to buy Allegra in the local CVS or Walgreens, but God forbid you have to show a driver's license to vote. And of course, by the way, the reason I ran this one first, and this is number 4, the voter ID one, is because what did I tell you in the intro to the show? Democrats don't get you to vote for them because nobody actually votes to increase their taxes, screw up their kids' education, and turn their health care over to the government. That's the Democrats' platform, right? Nobody actually votes for that. What they do is they vote against Republicans because Democrats in the media have them believing that they're racist, awful people. What does that have to do with eliminating voter ID and H.R. 1? Because every sane person, Joe, understands that, elections are pretty important. Probably not some bold assertion. Oh my gosh, election, everybody gets that. It's probably a good idea that you show up with a voter ID with your license on it to show that you're actually the person voting. Everybody gets that. So how do Democrats consistently get people to vote against things like voter ID by electing Democrats to office, which hate voter ID? Because they tell you it's racist, which, by the way, telling you voter ID is racist in and of itself because the whole premise is stupid. The premise of the anti-voter ID bloc in the Democrat Party is this. You can't ask Black and Hispanic people to produce a driver's license. Huh? Why exactly? Thank you, Joe, because my head scratch does not come up over the RE20 microphone like Joe's fancy head scratching sound effect does. Isn't that kind of racist? I'm just guessing that allow the worst thing you can do for a Democrat, the best thing for you, the worst thing for them, is to allow them to talk that through. Why exactly is asking a Black voter to produce a driver's license? Why is that a racist thing? Then watch the Democrat. Watch what they'll say. Well, Black voters, they're not, they can't figure out how to go to the DMV to get a driver's license. Did you just say that? Did you just really say that on an open mic somewhere or on your Twitter account? Because that sounds, Joe, just checking. Joe, do we have a racist detector on the phone? Do we have, Joe has a device. It's called the racist detector. He has this, it sounds like a bell when it go, if you say something that sounds racist, a bell goes up. So if you ask a Democrat why voter ID, it's not a good thing. They'll say, well, Black voters really can't get an ID because they really can't figure out how to do it. There you go. The racist bell. The racist detector bell goes ding, 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 ding. That sounds kind of racist. It sounds kind of racist. But of course, Democrats, their whole ethos is racist now. So here's number 1 from the Federalist piece. Eliminate voter ID. Why would we want that? After a brief overview of this history of bipartisan support for voter ID law, the letter continues, voter ID laws remain popular with 35 states requiring some of it. Yet the act, H.R. 1, would dismantle meaningful voter ID laws by allowing a statement as a substitute for document-backed identification to attest to the individual's identity and that the individual is eligible to vote in the election. So don't worry, Joe. You don't have to produce a license. All you got to do is sign something. Yes, I'm definitely the person who's here to vote, which you kind of do when you show up to vote anyway. How do they get stupid stuff like this to pass all the time, even though there's a bipartisan consensus that voter ID is probably a good thing? Again, because Democrats don't get you to vote for their policies. They get you to vote against Republicans by claiming things are racist the Republicans did, which are actually racist when the Democrats do them. Do you understand? I don't want to dwell on this. I know I'm kind of getting bogged down in it, but it's really important. Do you understand how racist it is to suggest that I'm serious. I'm dead serious here. Serious as a heart attack. Do you know how racist it is to suggest that Black and Hispanic voters can't figure out how to get a driver's license? Do you have any idea? All right, moving on. Number two of our four worst of the worst 15 things involved in the H.R. 1 disastrous debacle of an election bill. It's a scandal. This bill's the actual proposal of this bill's a scandal. They're going to register millions of criminally present foreign citizens to vote. Man, what could go wrong there?
What could go wrong?
What could possibly go wrong? By forcing states to automatically and duplicatively register all people to vote through government outposts, such as motor vehicles, state universities, and welfare agencies, H.R. 1 would register millions of illegal migrants to vote in the United States. I don't know. What could possibly go wrong? So now you have people who've entered the United States illegally. They're like, United States immigration laws, double barrel middle finger to you. We use the index finger to keep the show relatively family friendly on the video channel. But what could possibly go wrong there by allowing people who have no claim on citizenship rights in the United States to vote themselves benefits despite not doing anything to work for their citizenship the legal process-oriented way? What could possibly go wrong there? Let's register people in the country illegally to vote. And then let's get the same people to make illegal immigration legal so more people come in and vote for more benefits for people who have no claim on legal citizenship in the United States. What could possibly go wrong? Now, you may be saying, gosh, this article has 15 things that are really bad with H.R. 1. Imagine that I just picked the worst 4. There are more. There are 11 more doozies in there, too. So, yeah. No voter ID. Let's register illegal aliens to vote. Nothing wrong there. Let's go to the next one. Game day registration, which would explode opportunities for election cheating. Quote, adding to the threat of increased voter fraud, H.R. 1 would mandate nationwide automatic voter registration and election day voter registration. Write the attorney generals who are puzzled about this disaster. Such systems would provide too many opportunities for non-citizens and others ineligible to vote to register and cast fraudulent ballots before officials can take preventative action. Seems self-evident, folks. If you're going to mandate game day voting, election day voting, then of course you're going to have problems there because there's going to be a crunch to get the election, done and over with on game day. They're not going to have time to make sure you're the person you say you are. That one's actually self-evident, but very dangerous in and of itself. Let's get to the last one. They're going to mandate these drop boxes, and they're looking to further enhance the mail-in ballot voting process. Now, you may be saying to yourself, gosh, mail-in voting, that sounds like, if we were to do it on a mass scale, a recipe for failure. Don't take my word for it, by the way. Take the New York Times word for it. We'll get to that in a minute, but let's get to the final point here from the Federalist piece. Here's number 14 of their 15, number 4 on this show today. It mandates that ballot drop boxes. In Section 1907, H.R. 1 would mandate that beginning 45 days, 45 days, it's not election day anymore. It's turning into election year. Beginning 45 days before an election, in each county in the state, they shall provide in-person, secured, and clearly labeled drop boxes at which individuals may, at any time during the period, drop off voted absentee ballots in an election for federal office. Why do I even bring this up? Oh, a little jumpy today. Because now, Joe, we're not just talking about mail-in voting. We're not even talking about the mail. We're talking about dropping things off in a ballot drop-in box. How does that sound? In a ballot drop-in box. So now you don't only have the mailman, who at least knows you're you, who's not there to detect voter fraud at all. We don't even have the mailman. We just have a ballot drop box randomly placed, who knows, in the middle of the desert if you're voting in Nevada. Who knows? Who knows what's in there? Nobody's stopping you. No one's recording you. There's no fingerprint sensors, no voter IDs, no nothing. It's just some rando dropping a ballot in a ballot box. No custody, no control over it whatsoever. Mail-in voting's bad enough. Ballot drop box voting is a level below mail-in voting in security. Now, this, of course, was a big deal years ago to the New York Times. I've only put this article up on the show at least 5 or 6 times now. The New York Times was really worried about absentee voting, which again is even more secure. And I say that sarcastically, but the true is even more kind of semi-true, sarcastically Babylon Bee style. On the level of security, absentee and mail-in voting is obviously far below in-person voting. All right, we get that. Below all of that, at the bottom of the totem pole of election security is ballot box dropping, where it's not even a mail, it's just a ballot box. You just drop it in there, randomly placed. The New York Times in 2012, Adam Liptak, they were concerned about mail-in voting and absentee voting. Again, ballot drop box voting is even worse. All that stuff seems to have gone by the wayside. Now, why back in 2012? I'll show you a piece. Here's the New York Times article, by the way. Error and fraud at issue as absentee voting rises. Adam Liptak, October 6, 2012, the New York Times. So I'm sure YouTube will ban this video for even suggesting that you could have problems with mail-in voting, even though, again, I'm citing the New York Times. Ladies and gentlemen, you can look up this article yourself. Please do. Don't take my word for it. But I was talking to Guy this morning about this, sitting here kind of BSing about the show. And I was like, hey, Guy, you know why New York Times wrote this article back in 2012? Why would the New York Times expose failures in our mail-in and absentee voting process, that they're more likely to be rejected, mail-in votes, for problems? Because back in 2012, absentee voting was largely the purview of a senior population in Florida and the military. So they largely voted what, Joe? Republican.
Yeah.
So the New York Times was like, my gosh, we got a problem here. We got an election process, absentee voting that favors Republicans. How do we write a story bashing that one? Now that the Democrats are pushing through H.R. 1 through mass mail-in oh my gosh, I was just watching the news. They're playing a clip of the COVID stock market crash. They're like, stock market down 2,000 points. I'm like, oh my gosh, I better sell. That's not today. No worries. But now that they're pushing for, back to the show, they're pushing for mass mail-in balloting for everyone, and could benefit Democrats. All of a sudden, everybody's quiet about the problems with absentee voting and mail-in. Weird how that happens, isn't it? Quote, New York Times. This is not Dan Bongino. This is Dan Bongino reading the New York Times. Quotes, liberals. That means the New York Times wrote this in their piece. That's what quotes mean. Quote, New York Times. Yet votes cast by mail are less likely to be counted, more likely to be compromised, and more likely to be contested than those cast in a voting booth. Statistics show. Election officials reject almost 2% of ballots cast by mail. That's double the rate for in-person voting. Of course, this article will be memory holed now. Liberals will pretend it never happened, even though, again, Adam Liptak at the New York Times, I don't know, Adam, maybe he's still concerned about it. I'm not sure. The New York Times certainly isn't. It's weird that they would write an article in 2012 when absentee voting favored Republicans, that there was real problems with absentee voting, that the rate of rejection of those ballots was double for in-person voting. And now that they want to drop stuff in a ballot box, strangely, everybody's memory hold everything. Isn't that a little weird?